people like me. You need people like me so you can point your f***ing fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
News.
Okay, we'll start with this. I'm sure that most of you have heard by now. Terri Harper joins Jake Paul's most valuable promotions, confirming that the Rhiannon Dixon WBO title fight, where she became WBO champion, was in fact the final fight of her existing Matchroom contract.
She's fought once since then against Natalie Zimmerman, but that was not a Matchroom show.
WBO World Lightweight Champion Terri Harper has inked a deal with Jake Paul's MVP, ending her long-term partnership with Eddie Hearn. The 28-year-old, having fought under the Matchroom banner throughout the majority of her career, was last seen headlining a GBM sports card. On that particular night in May, the Yorkshire woman defended her WBO title against Germany's own Natalie Zimmerman, treating her home fans to a comprehensive display at the Echo Power Stadium in Doncaster. But now it would appear that Harper, 16-2 with 2 draws and 6 knockouts, is poised to make her U.S. debut with MVP, a stateside outfit which, having already built a stacked stable of female talent, looks to further cement itself as the flagship promoter of women's boxing. Terri Harper, meanwhile, finds herself in a strong position after dethroning Rhiannon Dixon last year, with her dominant performance crowning her a 3-weight world champion. Before that, the technician suffered a punishing 4th-round stoppage defeat against Sandy Ryan up there at welterweight, but has now seemingly found a home for herself at 135. Elsewhere in that division, WBA world champion Stephanie Han, who is also signed to MVP, will look to retain her title against Paulina Angel on August 23rd. You can anticipate that Terri may end up fighting the winner of that fight in a unification match.
Whoever the winner ends up being, whether Stephanie can keep her title or not.
It was just last month, too, that Beatriz Ferreira defended her IBF strap on an MVP bill, with both the Brazilian and Han representing potential opponents for Harper.
And you know that Beatriz Ferreira, like Terri Harper, her last fight was not on a Matchroom show, and her next fight isn't going to be on a Matchroom show. So can we assume that she's left Matchroom as well and will end up at MVP?
At the same time, Caroline Dubois, who holds the WBC title, remains the obvious dance partner for Harper, especially given the domestic intrigue that surrounds their potential unification. But regardless of who comes next, Harper is no doubt gleaming with joy after striking a promotional deal with MVP. I am excited to join the movement of women's boxing at MVP, she said in a press release. Nikisa Badarian and Jake Paul are doing great things for the sport of boxing and for women in particular. I'm looking forward to some big nights and big fights ahead. Let's go. She went as far as calling out Caroline Dubois directly,
saying, the next chapter of my career is going to be the best one yet. Big fights only, Caroline Dubois. Let's go!
The latest Matchroom fighter, former Matchroom fighter, to end up on the shores of MVP, that are fast becoming the authority in women's boxing,
when so many of the fighters that MVP signed recently were first boxing under the Matchroom banner, who I would say is directly responsible for the women's boxing boom of 2016. Nobody at the time was signing more female fighters than Matchroom, but it would seem that MVP has usurped them.
What fights can MVP do for Terri now that she's over there? There's really nothing off limits. They can pay to do a Stephanie Han fight, a Beatriz Ferreira fight, a Caroline Dubois fight, but they can also pay to do a Holly Holm fight, who they also signed.
Remember that Holly Holm recently came back after a long hiatus from the sport of boxing, and she means to win a title in the women's lightweight division because she never held a title there. She was a champion at 3 weights. just not at lightweight. So she's made it her mission to win a title there.
That is yet another fight that MVP can make for Terri Harper. Harper versus Holm. But one is left to wonder. With the number of fighters that used to box under the Matchroom banner now boxing at MVP, does Matchroom have any interest in women's boxing, or are they bowing out? Their stable of Valkyries, once the biggest in the sport, is really down to just 4 fighters. Katie Taylor, whose last 2 fights weren't even on Matchroom shows, and she herself is very close to retiring.
That's 1.
Sky Nicholson, who still seems to be over there.
That's 2.
18-year-old boxing prodigy Tia Ayton, she's just getting started. Matchroom picked her up.
That's 3. Molly McCann makes 4.
Meatball Molly of the UFC, who recently retired from mixed martial arts and means to kick off her professional boxing career under the Matchroom banner. That's just 4 girls, though. 4 confirmed. We don't know if Sandy Ryan is still with them. We don't know if Rhiannon Dixon is still with them.
Wouldn't be surprised if they're not.
At the rate that Matchroom is hemorrhaging female fighters that are now ending up at MVP, it wouldn't surprise me if now Matchroom is really down to just 4 girls, one of which is very close to retiring. Though even with that, I don't get the sense that Matchroom is completely done because, well, if they were, they wouldn't have just signed Molly McCann, who I just mentioned. They wouldn't have just signed Tia Ayton. These are recent signings. It gives me the impression that maybe Matchroom is revamping their stable.
And perhaps waiting out one or some situations. We know that Boxer is in between broadcasters right now, and their fighters seem to be leaving. Joshua Buatsi is rumored to be going to Queensbury. What about Lauren Price? What about Carolyn Dubois? What about Karis Artingstall? It's possible that one or some of those last 3 female fighters may end up going to Matchroom. I could see Karis going to Matchroom. I could see Lauren going over there too. Though I could just as easily see all 3 going to MVP. Nothing would surprise me.
The point is, I don't think that Matchroom is completely done with women's boxing, but they may perhaps want to update their roster, update their stable. They may feel they've done all they can do with the existing stable, and they want some new faces, fresh ones.
We'll talk more about it in another video.
And just in keeping with the theme of what used to be Matchroom fighters, former Matchroom fighter Liam Paro is the latest to make the welterweight move. Relinquishes IBF title eliminator against Lindolfo Delgado. Liam Paro isn't interested in another 140-pound title run. The ring's number 5 junior welterweight contender announced his move to the welterweight division on Wednesday. Earlier this month, the IBF ordered a title eliminator between Liam Paro and Lindolfo Delgado, a week after Paro beat Jonathan Navarro by 5th-round stoppage. The winner between Paro and Delgado would have emerged as Richardson Hitchens' next mandatory challenger. Hitchens had already beat Paro back in December via split decision for the IBF title. The fight marked Paro's first championship defense after pitching a 12-round upset decision win against then-champion Subriel Matias in June of last year. Matias has since reclaimed gold, edging past Alberto Puello via a majority decision as part of the Ring 3 card in New York this month. Now Paro, 26-1 with 16 knockouts, looks to make his mark in a division that features Ryan Garcia, Rolly Romero, Devin Haney, Brian Norman, Manny Pacquiao, Mario Barrios. Montes Stanionis is on the comeback, that former champion. He's having a homecoming fight in Lithuania.
And there are outliers like Suleiman Sissoko,
Shakram Gayasov, the less talked about welterweights. During the Floyd Mason, John Parker broadcast in Queensland, Australia on Wednesday, Paro declared he'd been pushing his body to its limits in making 140 pounds and decided to move up, much like Arnold Barboza and Jose Ramirez have in recent weeks.
Yeah, Arnold recently announced he's going to be moving up to welterweight and campaigning there moving forward.
10 years in this sport, it's finally time to go up a division. I conquered the world at 140 and have been doing it since 18 years old. 29 now, and it's getting a little bit harder to make the weight, so we made the decision to go up and chase a different title at welterweight. I said it before. 2-time has a ring, but 2-division champion has one too. I'm keen to get it done. He stated his main event social media added he wants 2 fights between now and year's end. In addition to a 150-pound catchweight clash against Keith Thurman.
That can happen. Keith Thurman ain't doing nothing right now.
Paro was eager about potentially luring Manny Pacquiao back to Australia. The legend, my favorite fighter, Manny Pacquiao, is back in boxing, said Paro. Back at welterweight, man. Get me in there. Bring him to Australia. I'm sure he wants to try and get one back on Suncorp Stadium, where he lost to Jeff Horn in a big upset back in 2017. I'd be willing to offer that fight. Very exciting.
Welterweight needs diversity. The kids that have already moved up there, like Ryan and Rolly and Devin, we know how they move. We know how they are. We know what to expect and what not to. So it's a division that needs more diversity and more traditional fighters that are willing to do things in a more traditional way. Enter Liam Paro, who caused a big upset in Puerto Rico for then champion Subriel Matias. He's a solid fighter who doesn't have to be as careful or as strategic as a Rolly Romero. He's not all caught up being a social media influencer like Ryan Garcia,
who doesn't model his entire persona inside and outside of the ring after Floyd Mayweather like Devin Haney does. Liam Paro is his own man, and welterweight needs more fighters like that, not more wannabes. It's good news. Though if he's not fighting Lindolfo Delgado at 140 pounds in that IBF final eliminator, Lindolfo will end up fighting someone else to crown a mandatory challenger. Ranked behind Lindolfo is the United Kingdom's own Dalton Smith.
Yeah, Dalton's supposed to be fighting Subriel Matias in the fall.
Ranked right behind Dalton is Gabriel Valenzuela of Mexico. Maybe Lindolfo will end up fighting him. Maybe he'll end up fighting Kenny Sims.
If he wins this weekend.
Yeah, Kenny Sims is going to be boxing Oscar Duarte in the main event of a Golden Boy Promotions show this Saturday. If he wins, maybe Lindolfo fights him. If he loses, maybe Lindolfo fights Oscar Duarte.
Oscar?
You see how it goes. Now that Liam Paro is out of the picture, the IBF is going to go down their rank standings to find the next highest ranked available contender for Lindolfo to fight.
Liam is set to kick off his welterweight campaign. I wish him the best because he's a quality operator and a fan-friendly fighter to watch. Let's see what he can get into at 147 pounds.
He's definitely a fighter that always comes hungry, and these are the types of fighters I like to fight against. You know, I don't run from nobody. I'd rather go into war than it to be a technical fight, to be honest with you. And this is what the people want to see. So Anthony Yarde, this is maybe his last opportunity. I wanted to say his last opportunity, but this is, the opportunity for him is going to be hard to come by after I beat him, you know what I mean? But he knows this is an opportunity for him to become world champion. He's going to be working extremely hard. I know Anthony Yarde is no pushover, so I'm working extremely hard too. So at the end of the day, you're just going to get two great fighters that have a lot to prove, not only to themselves but to the world, that they're the best fighters in the world, and that spells the making of a great fight.
Yeah, not just two fighters with something to prove, but two guys who always lay it all on the line.
Yeah.
There's not going to be any running around in this fight. No. I think you guys are not going to be able. You're going to be finding each other right in the center of the ring.
Yeah, exactly. And like I said, I just want to give the fans the best fights possible. And I know what I could do. I'm getting stronger every year, and I have so much experience now that, I want to go against anybody. You know what I mean? And I'm definitely going to go in there and beat every single person and put the light heavyweight division on notice and let everybody know that David Benavidez is not going nowhere.
So David Benavidez means to put the entire light heavyweight division on notice with a victory over Anthony Yarde in a fight that I'm finding difficult to edge and difficult to forecast because David is a PBC fighter, as we all know, and PBC fighters have a bad tendency.
They can't stay in character. This is going to be the first time that he's boxing off platform
on a non-PBC show. What we've seen historically is whenever PBC fighters got to deal with somebody from the outside world, outside of that biosphere, they struggle. And sometimes they lose. Like Wilder lost to Tyson Fury, Stephen Fulton lost to Naoya Inoue, Spence lost to Terrence Crawford. More recent years, we saw David Morrell, who was looking like a wrecking machine up until that point, box on one of Turkey El Al Sheikh's shows against Radavalle Kalajdzic, and David didn't look good in that fight.
He boxed off platform.
The same thing happened more recently in New York when he boxed on another one of Turkey's shows against Imam Katayev. To a lot of people, David Morrell should have lost that fight.
He boxed off platform.
And now David Benavidez is set to make the same move that David Morrell just made when he boxes on one of Turkey's shows in November and boxes off-platform for the first time. So how do we know that he'll be able to stay in character, stay the Mexican monster that he has been, when so many PBC fighters fail to do that, dealing with fighters from the outside world?
Now, Anthony's got some losses, but those losses did come to bigger punchers than David Benavidez is.
Lost to Kovalev, a loss to Artur Beterbiev. These are bigger punchers and better finishers than David Benavidez. Even if they manage to beat Anthony Yarde, I don't know that it'll be the same way for David Benavidez. The edge I give David is he's got a better engine than Anthony Yarde, and he's busier in a round than Anthony Yarde. He is a more prolific puncher who throws a lot of punches.
The edge I give to Anthony is experience at this weight, and I think he's the bigger puncher of the two. That punch for punch, I think Anthony Yarde punches harder than David Benavidez.
He's coming off a win over Lyndon Arthur in what was their third meeting, their third fight. Some would say that Anthony didn't look good in that fight, that there were moments where Lyndon Arthur was shaking and baking him and walking him into straight punches.
You could say that for long spells in that fight, Anthony didn't look good.
But do remember, Lyndon Arthur and David Benavidez are nothing alike. So where Anthony might have looked one way with Lyndon, he may look another with David. Remember that Lyndon Arthur is a mover and a jabber. He's a boxer, whereas David Benavidez is a brawler. He's a pressure guy. He's not the kind of guy you gotta chase him around the ring.
What may have caused Anthony Yarde to struggle in the Lyndon Arthur fights will not be there when he fights David Benavidez. These two guys might meet each other in the center of the ring and go hell for leather.
And with PBC guys not really being able to stay in character when they have to deal with fighters from the outside world, this fight is somewhat difficult for me to forecast. On the predication that David actually wins and he passes this acid test,
does he then go back to the PBC?
I'm beginning to wonder if there will be anything to go back to by year's end. The PBC still ain't doing all that many shows. They still don't have that many fight dates, given where David is campaigning.
He's a light heavyweight now.
PBC don't have any bodies at light heavyweight. They don't have anything for David to do, and the biggest and best fights for David are on an international stage, not a domestic one. Turkey LL Sheik has expressed his desire to put David Benavidez in the ring with the winner of Beterbiev versus Bivol 3 in what would be the biggest fight, I think, at this weight.
And the biggest opportunity for David. Name me another fight that's going to get him multi-millions.
You know Turkey LL Sheik is paying these fighters through the nose to box on his shows, and fighting the winner of that fight on one of Turkey's shows would present the greatest financial value to David. So if he actually does beat Anthony Yarde, I don't think he goes back to the PBC. There may not be anything to go back to.
Working with Turkey, maybe you win, or maybe you lose, but one way or another, you make a lot of money. The most money you can make.
We'll see what happens in November.